Casey, we have a verdict. We have a verdict from the jury. In the Sean Diddy Combs trial, we're told they sent a note just a few moments ago that the jury has reached a verdict on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are unable to reach a verdict on count 1 as we have jurors with unpersuadable opinions on both sides. Now to break that down, count 1 is RICO, the most complex charge here that could come with up to life in prison. The remaining charges include 2 counts of sex trafficking, 1 for each victim, Cassie Ventura and a pseudonym named Jane, and the last 2 in terms of translation into the form of prostitution. So we now know that on the RICO charge, it appears that the jury presently is hung. We do not yet know what the verdict is in the remaining counts, but suffice to say, over the last 7 weeks, the prosecution has been trying to persuade a jury of now 12 people with the alternates out that Sean Diddy Combs should serve the rest of his life in prison based on 5 felony counts. Now, the jurors are not to consider in any way, shape, or form the potential sentence, but this is huge. We are now the second day of deliberations. It has been a little more than, 10, 12 hours of deliberation, including notes, lunch breaks, and an overnight deliberative process. And here we have right now all these notes in between. We are waiting for the verdict, but also the judge to make a decision on count 1 and whether they should continue to deliberate, given called with the Allen charge, meaning go back and deliberate until you are most assuredly and precisely and finally hung. But according to these jurors, count 1, the RICO charge, appears to be the one where they do not have unanimity among the 12.
Yeah, Laura, let me, thank you so much. This is huge breaking news here that this verdict is beginning to come in. And of course, I say beginning because as you've outlined, the major charge, charge 1, you say they are essentially hung. Can you explain a little bit more about, just for those of us who don't do what you do every single day, I'm familiar with a hung jury, but you seem to be saying that the judge has some options here and that this may not be the end of the story. Can you just explain that a little more precisely?
Of course. When you have a federal jury or you have a jury, you want to have a unanimous opinion and decision about guilty or not guilty. And we do not yet know what that is. But jurors can sometimes say, we've reached an impasse. We haven't made up our minds. We are essentially stalled on this particular charge. And the judge may say, have you done all that you can to ensure that you have considered all the elements, that you've weighed all of the considerations, that everyone has reached their final conclusion? At that point, which is called an Allen charge, the jury might say, you know what, Your Honor, we haven't actually thought of that. We can give it one more try. Or they might very well say, Your Honor, we're coming to you about the rest of them because this is the one that we are hopelessly deadlocked on. No additional time is necessary or will yield any alternate conclusion of unanimity or a decision. So now the judge has to deal with that. If that's the case, if this jury says that we are officially hung on one charge and we have a verdict on the rest, well, the prosecution, who has the burden of proof and will always have a burden of proof in a trial, as they should, will have a discussion among themselves. Do they insist that they go back again and deliberate, or do they learn the verdict on the rest of the remaining charges? Right now, we do not know, but we're told from Kara Scannell, who has been inside of this courtroom, that the tension is thick, that the lawyers were surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, that he had his hands clasped in his lap. Remember, his family has been here, his mother here today. Just earlier today, Kara even overheard Sean Diddy Combs saying to his mother, just relax, it's going to be all right. Well, now we're waiting to see what that verdict will be and whether the judge will have the jurors go back and try to deliberate further on that charge. I want to bring in, I see Elizabeth Wagmeister, who's here, and we have, of course, been covering this trial, and this is stunning to think that there is now some semblance of a verdict. I was telling Casey, we don't know about count 1. That's the most serious one.
It is the most serious one, and I have an update for you from our colleagues inside the courtroom right now, Laura. So Casey, I want to update you live right now. Both sides want the judge to push the jury to continue deliberating. Holmes' defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said that the defense would like the judge to bring out the jury to instruct them to continue deliberating rather than to send them a note. Both sides agree that they would like this instruction. They want the jury to continue deliberating. So, as Laura said, this is up to the judge's discretion.
Yeah.
Does he say continue and reach a verdict on count one, or, okay, we can be hung on this, but both sides have the same agreement that they want them to continue?
Yeah, no, really interesting. So, Laura and Elizabeth, please weigh in here as well. But, Laura, can you kind of run down, if we have verdicts in the other counts, how do you compare the potential implications of a sentence in those counts compared to count one? Like, how much more serious or significant is count one compared to the other charges?
Great question. Count one is by far the most serious. RICO carries up to life in prison with sometimes mandatory minimums. It's a very serious charge. Now, the verdict form required this jury to find either guilty or not guilty on that high charge. And if they found that, they had to go down the line for so-called predicate crimes. That's a fancy way of saying, well, did the government prove or not prove bribery, kidnapping, arson? The idea of this went down the line of other things, including drug distribution and even prostitution. Then there was a second part that talked about, did you conclude that there was sex trafficking proven with respect to Cassie or Jane? Now, why that's important here is because for each of those different types of crimes, the jury was asked whether the government had proven or not proven their case. Now, you see some overlaps here, right? Because you've got a RICO charge, you've got 2 sex trafficking charges, and 2 prostitution-related charges. And so, if the jurors have made a decision with respect to any of those predicate crimes that were already listed, and they might very well have known what they wanted to do in the other charges as well. But make no mistake about it, the most complex case, Elizabeth, has been the RICO charge. It required them to prove that there was an enterprise of people around him that engaged in these type of crimes within a 10-year period and established a pattern.
Well, and Elizabeth, you obviously updated us on that reporting that both Sean Diddy Combs' defense team as well as prosecutors want the judge to tell the jury, go back, try again, figure this out. Do you have an understanding about why it is that the Combs side in particular would really want that to happen?
You know, we don't know, but I would imagine that they could be thinking, and I would want to hear Laura's thoughts here as a former prosecutor. A school of thought is typically that the quicker that a verdict is reached, that the better it could be for the defense. So perhaps that they think that things are going their way, they want them to keep going. But I actually want to go back to the question that you asked Laura before this about which crime or which charge is the most serious. And as Laura spelled out, it is absolutely that first charge of racketeering conspiracy because it holds a maximum sentence of life in prison. But these other charges are still incredibly serious. Counts 2 and counts 3, which are sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and sex trafficking of the woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Those are 2 separate counts. The judge instructed the jury to deliberate separately on them. Each of those carries a minimum sentence of 15 years. So these are all incredibly serious charges here. The final 2, counts 4 and 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, each carry a maximum of 10 years.
And the idea of the defense wanting to possibly have this is about finality. You know, listen, they know that there is double jeopardy that could attach the second, essentially, this trial began. But they also want to, meaning it could not be tried twice for the same matter. And yet they still want finality. They want unanimity and they want finality. They do not want to figure out whether the prosecution, if it is a hung jury, wants to go back and try to retry this case. Can you imagine? 34 witnesses, 7 weeks, overwhelmingly focused on the charge of RICO. If it's a hung jury, that is the option of the prosecution to go back and try the case again without a double jury being implicated, double jeopardy being implicated, excuse me.
All right, let's reset for a second. We're also joined now by Ellie Honig, our legal analyst here, and of course Laura and Elizabeth are going to stick with us through now our continuing breaking coverage because the jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trial has reached a verdict on some counts. The jury just sending a note saying that they reached a verdict on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, but that they are unable to reach a verdict on count 1, racketeering conspiracy. We do know that both sides want the judge to push the jury to continue deliberating. Mark Agnifilo, the defense counsel, said that they want the judge to bring out the jury and to instruct them on deliberating, and both parties are going to work on the wording of that instruction. And just to remind you, there are 5 counts here against Sean Diddy Combs. 1 on that racketeering charge, RICO. 2 each of sex trafficking, and 2 of transportation to engage in prostitution. As our Laura Coates just noted, the most serious of these is the one that the jury still has not reached a unanimous decision on. That is the racketeering charge that carries potentially up until life in prison.